You go. You're being recorded.
Okay, thank you, Donna. Good evening, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order at 6:01. Thanks, everybody, for jumping on. First order of business is public comment. I don't know, Sarah, if you qualify as public comment or not, but do you have anything that you want to add right now? You're certainly welcome to join at any time. So
Did you see my email that I sent today?
I did, and my head's pretty close to exploding, but thank you for taking the effort and putting the time into that, because that's exactly what we need to.
Yeah, and
have
it's
that
not
kind of
done.
No, understood. But I appreciate your efforts on that. So I don't see any other public, so we'll move past public comment. Approval of minutes. Marshall sent those out earlier today. We have the meeting minutes of May 20th, 2021. And if everybody's had a chance to look at those, I would welcome a motion to approve.
So moved.
That was Walt, and a second. I'll second it, make it easy. And let me call the roll for the vote on that. Marshall?
Yes.
I say yes. Glenn?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Walt?
Yes.
Okay, great. Those are approved unanimously. Other business, does anybody have anything that they want to talk about before we jump into the review?
If you don't mind, Bill, if I could take maybe 5 or 10 minutes to go over something that we had discussed at our last meeting a couple of weeks ago, that I think that's an important part of the zoning that might need to be addressed.
Go ahead.
If you don't mind. It was about, we had talked about that gentleman that had got overturned. The judge overturned the zoning board of appeals decision not to allow him to build in a industrial zone. I'd just like to go over that and kind of tell the rest of the board how that came to be, and if there's any ideas on how to rectify that so it doesn't happen again, because it has come up a couple times. I'd certainly appreciate anybody's input, if you don't mind. Is that okay, Bill?
Yeah, go ahead.
Continue on with this. Good. What ended up happening was this gentleman had bought 14 acres of land, had it for a few years, and went to the town hall to get a building permit. Got a building permit application. Went and applied for a 3-bedroom septic system. He did the perk test, deep hole test, got the septic system approved, installed it, got it approved and backfilled it. Went to the highway department, got his driveway permit, actually put his well in, took the water test, got it proved that it was potable water. And at that point, he thought he took his plans to the fire department, got them signed off for where the smoke detectors had to go, went to the building inspector, and the building inspector denied him his building permit because his property was on industrial land. He came to the zoning board for a variance, and I thought that, well, since the town let him put a 3-bedroom residential septic system on there, let him put a well on the property for a residence. The town approved a driveway for him. The fire department approved his plans for the smoke detectors. I thought that was a hardship. But for the reason that I understand why the board voted the way they did, they said that industrial land and commercial property in Ashburnham is really hard to come by. And once it's gone, it's gone. So they said that they didn't feel as though that he should get his variance granted. So he was 4-1, so the motion carried. He appealed our decision, went to the judge. The judge remanded it back to the zoning board. We heard it again. And except this time, the guy said, I've got 14 acres of land. What I would like to do is subdivide my land and take 2 acres off where my house is going to be. Then I'll leave the other 12 acres zoned industrial. And the board still said no. So he went back to the judge, and the judge overruled the board's decision. After that happened, I went to the Board of Health. I can't remember if you were on there, Glenn, or not, but I went to the Board of Health and said, this is really unfortunate that this poor man got a septic system permit for a 3-bedroom house and actually installed it. And the Board of Health was very sympathetic to the guy, and they were right in what they said. They said that our job isn't zoning. We really don't check the zoning. If someone comes in and asks us for a permit for a residential septic system, then we're going to act on that. We don't research the zoning, and they had a good point. They said at some point this man must have known that his property was industrial. If he didn't, he really should have. And I said, okay, well, what can we do to fix this so this doesn't happen again? I don't know. At that point, I wasn't sure if this individual was running a game on us and knew it all along. Just was hoping that if he got all these other permits, they would have no choice but to say yes. Whether or not he was doing that, I didn't get that feeling from the guy, but I tried to come up with some idea so that this wouldn't happen to somebody again, because the man obviously invested tens of thousands of dollars in the land to build this house. And ultimately, the building inspector said you can't put a residence there. And the zoning board wouldn't grant them a variance. Do you guys have any ideas of what I ended up doing was on the little the form to fill out a building permit application. Sue Dembeck was the land use clerk at the time. I went to see her and talked to her about it. Said, Sue, what can we do to make sure this doesn't happen to another person again? They put 30 grand into a lot and then find out they can't put a house on. So Sue was she was kind enough to kind of keep an eye on it and make people aware of the fact when they came in to get a building permit application from her. We made a point of telling them, well, make sure what your zoning is here before you go through all this stuff. But Sue, God rest her soul, has passed away a number of years ago, and I don't know if that's being done now or not. But do you guys think that there's anything we could do to clarify that on the building permit application to make sure that someone doesn't get into that jam again?
It sounds like he didn't come in for a building permit from your story. It sounds like he didn't come in for a building permit until he'd already done all this other stuff. So having something on the building permit application wouldn't be a heads up. Fixing our GIS and getting the word out and making it easy for people to see what zoning district they're in, it would be wonderful to be.
Yes, what he had done, Sarah, was when he got the building permit application, they said, well, this is what you have to get a building permit. You have to prove that you've got a way to dispose of your sewage. You have to prove that you have potable water. So the way that he read it was, he said, well, I got to have a septic system permit first before I can submit my building permit application. I have to have proof that I have potable water first before I submit my building permit application. So he did those things before.
So we can certainly have a checklist that includes verify your zoning district.
Yeah.
This is Glenn Hathaway, Dave. I don't recall that individual, but I mean, I think that's an easy fix for the Board of Health. And I'm going to contact Rick Metcalf, our engineer from Neshoba, and just, let's review the application for sewage. And if it's not on there, maybe it should be on there. Just, that's how it slipped through. So, if we do that, Sarah, that we can stop it at the Board of Health right there. So I think that's an easy fix from the Board of Health.
And likewise, it's an easy fix for the planning board. There's no reason why our applications for A&Rs or whatever they might be doing can't add something that validates what the zoning is for relative to what it is they're asking to do.
Yeah, well, I think it's a box on the application. Check here. Yes, it's residential construction versus commercial, whatever. So again, Dave, I'll send that out tonight to Rick and get an answer back within a day or two. Okay.
Okay. Excellent. Thanks for listening to me, guys.
I appreciate it.
I would have one, I think, more encompassing resolution. Under the Wetlands Act, we can't issue a permit until all other local approvals have been obtained. Not building permits, but ZBA permits, planning board, permits, whatever other, bylaw, earth removal, or whatever, we can't issue a permit until all those other matters are taken care of. If we had a similar kind of preemptive that you can't do, certain things on your property till you get all these things, other things done. I mean, because right now, and it happens all the time, people go and they clear cut the entire site, they grade the entire site, and then they come in and they say, okay, and they grade or excavate, within the wetland buffer or whatever. And then they come in and say, okay, now I want to build X houses. Well, what if they get denied? What if they need a ZBA permit, they get denied? They've already ruined the entire site.
Right.
The damage is done. And
Yeah,
so,
I don't want to accuse anybody of anything, but I think a lot of that's done on purpose.
oh, it is. Oh, it is, because it's, you do it now because, we may get denied and, we'll ask forgiveness later. It happens all the time.
Or we'll fight it in court,
Yeah, and so if we had a bona fide approach that you can't do these kind of things until you get the approval. I mean, some of these, it's not like they're going in with a forest cutting plan and they're going to make money just because of that. And that we have no control over anyway. That's a state thing. But these 3-lot subdivisions where they clear cut it and excavate it, what if they get denied?
Yeah, well, don't you have that situation up on Meeting House Hill now? Where that property next to the cemetery? That Ryan McGuan bought, he bought it and they clear cut that damn thing. They didn't check with anyone.
Well, and they did it up on Ashby Road, in the green business /business district. I mean, they clear cut that whole site and within 99.99 feet of the wetland, excavated everything and then applied, instead of for a motel, for 3 houses. And, if, regulations were such that they needed other permits that were denied, well, they just ruined 9 acres of land.
Right.
And it'd be great to, stop that from happening.
To that discussion, over the last 20 years, I've seen the same engineering stamps and probably half a dozen engineers that live around here, 80% of the applications coming in. So guess what? We start with the box on the application, what's its own, confirm. And then the other thing is going back to these engineers, that we see for most of the part, and let's let them know this has been an issue and, we're going to watch for that. And that works. Most builders in the area, they know what towns are tough, from building inspectors to electrical inspectors to sewage. They know. Again, you probably get that once in a while, where you get the individual bill that you're right, that, I'm just going to do it, I'll ask later. Okay.
Yeah.
Once they clear cut, it's done. So I think that's another thing we can do, for the Board of Health is mark, put it on the application, brought up, the ZBA, all that. But the other thing is let local engineers know too, that's become an issue for us. If you're going to start a set of plans for someone to submit, that's number one. It's got to be in the right, they got to go down and check that it's in the right zoning. Again, I might talk to Rick Metcalf and he might just go, oh yeah, that's on there. Or people are aware of that, okay? So, but, so again, I think we notify people and let them know, that's been an issue and we're going to look for that. So.
Yeah, and obviously, as we move along here, we're going to get some additional swings at some of these things. So I think that's a good call out, Dave. And, we'll cobble something together here and try to make it easier for people to understand, which kind of leads me into my other business update. So I got a call a week or so ago from Carolyn Yetto from General Code. Excuse me, because we still have not signed that contract. So I'm not going to get into why, but we're close. She was actually on her way to a conference in Plymouth, Massachusetts today. So we made an appointment. She actually came in and met with Brian and I yesterday afternoon. And we had a good conversation. And essentially, the reason we haven't signed the contract yet is that we're trying to use, we have 2 grants that I had talked to you about before. And the way the language is in the grants doesn't line up, we think, closely enough to what General Code's proposal says. So Brian's fearful that we may not be able to use the grant money for that. So I got an email from her today. They're reworking the language on the proposal to have it in closer proximity to, you know, what the grants call for. But then on top of that, I'm sure you've all heard about the American Recovery Plan that the Biden administration has put out there. And there's money in there for cities and towns all across the country. And the rules and regulations have been released by the Treasury Department and through the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And there's been a bunch of hearings and things like that. So Ashburnham is in line for $1.8 million of that money. But again, there's certain things you can do with it. There's certain things you can't do with it. It appears that one of the things we can do with it is try to tie in some of our GIS mapping with what we're trying to do here with code.
You just made one building commissioner very, very happy.
Yeah, and so and along with that, it turns out that General Code also has a program that integrates with their bylaw program with the GIS mapping. So there's a possibility that we could take the, you know, the recodification and the legal review and things like that we're going to do and wrap that into one package with GIS and get it all paid for under the American Recovery Plan. So again, it was encouraging. It's a little bit disappointing we don't have the contract done yet, so we get an editor assigned, but this could be a good thing that works out here. And we should know within a brief period. So Brian thinks one way or another, we'll have the contract signed by the first week in July to get that thing going. So I explained to Carolyn what we were doing and how we were still meeting and things like that. There was also some discussion about our plan was do the recodification, even though that we know there's problems with it, do that, get it approved at town meeting, and then go back and start the legal analysis and do that. So there's some conversation about possibly doing it all at one time. And as we worked our way through that, we decided that that wasn't the best option for us. We're going to stick with the original plan that we had talked about here, knowing that, you know, there is some inherent problem. Like we talked about in the general bylaws, that personnel bylaw that's in there. Carolyn said that's probably going to get kicked out. When they start the recodification, they're going to say to us, this is not a bylaw. It should never be a bylaw. Get it out of there. So some of that stuff's going to go on in the first process as well. And then you turn around and you make that a policy. That's all. It doesn't have to be a bylaw. You make it a policy. So I was pretty encouraged coming out of the meeting that I think there's some good things that are going to come out of this. And with the integration possibly of this whole thing, it will address some of the things that we're talking about here, Dave, where someone can click, go here, go there, and know where it's zoned, whether it's right or it's wrong, whatever it is. Then there's not going to be any excuses for them to say, geez, we didn't know. You know, the information wasn't available to us, that type of stuff. So.
You know, going back to what Dave said, there may be a partial bylaw solution to this too. I mean, I can't, you know, I work in Boston and Brookline, so I can't compare those communities, but I can tell you that anything we want to do with any property in Boston or Brookline, we're essentially required to go to them and tell them a statement of what we plan on doing there. And we get a checklist of everything we have to go through in order to do what it is we want. There may be a way to just say, hey, you can only clear so much of your property or only do this thing without having some sort of, you know, test, you know, without telling, you know, informing the town of what you're wanting to do and not an order of conditions, but some sort of list of what you will be required to do in order to do that. And if there may be a bylaw solution there, but I don't know. I'm just sort of saying, I think that because like you said, right now, somebody can go and just absolutely clear cut their land and destroy it. And they've done it in several places in town that I know of. And then have your backs against the wall and you're the bad guy for telling them, no, you can't do what you want to do with that property.
Yeah, the same thing is true, I think, potentially on the business side where somebody wants to do something and they haven't checked on it, they don't meet the criteria, whatever it is, and we say no, and then all of a sudden we're anti-business, because we said, no, you can't do this because you don't meet the qualifications for what you have to do, so.
I have a question about the general code thing you were talking about. Do they have their own GIS platform? So we would be leaving Access GIS?
No, there's, because he was specifically talking about who we are looking at as a GIS provider and things like that. No, I think what it does is it actually integrates with it in some way, shape, or form with the GIS provider and integrates in with the code. So you basically only have to go one place and it'll take you wherever you need to go with the mapping. And again, I could be butchering the hell out of that thing because it's clearly not in my wheelhouse, but generally speaking, it sounded like a real good thing that they were talking about. So
Yeah, as long as what they're connecting to is fixed.
yeah, no, exactly. It would have, yeah, because we know that, that what we have from a mapping perspective is marginal at best, and there's all kinds of problems with it. So connecting to bad information or bad data is still bad data. So it just makes it easier to get to the bad data, that's all. So we have to correct the data.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't a different vendor for the actual mapping, because then I'd say talk to the assessing company, talk to
Well,
RRP.
I think there's going to be a lot of conversations about that. And again, Brian's been working on some of these things with the ARP money. So there's a bunch of that stuff going on. Certainly no decisions have been made, but it was encouraging to hear that that's something that's much closer to reality than I would have anticipated 6 months ago, or even 4 months ago. So. Okay, anybody have anything else?
Just one quick question, Dave. Without having the table in front of me, is residential development allowed in an industrial zone?
No,
Okay, got it. Well, shame on the guy.
well, I kind of thought what Bill had said, that I kind of thought that he almost might have done it knowing that it was industrial land.
Yeah, but I mean,
And thinking,
I
if I
don't-
do all this, how can they say no?
I don't know why, the judge did what he did in that if it's, right up front, it's not allowed. Shame on him for not, doing his due diligence. If he spent thousands of dollars, then that's his problem. Anyway, enough.
There's another strange thing. I noticed there's weird differences between light industrial A, light industrial B, and industrial. In industrial, you can actually build a house with a special permit, but you need a variance in LIA and LIB. So there's some stuff that's just inconsistent. I noticed some of it and put it in my thing, but I didn't notice that one. So
Yeah, no, I think the whole table needs to be reviewed.
Yeah, and again, that's what we're going to get after, between the recodification and that whole thing. Then when they start the legal review, they're going to go through and do all that stuff, not only, spelling, grammatical, that kind of stuff, but they're going to be checking against MGL and looking for these inconsistencies between the bylaws and things like that. So for me, that's the beauty of the whole thing, is that you're going to have two professional editors that's all they do is work on Massachusetts code, that are going to be going over this with a fine tooth comb. And then, we have the information that Sarah's providing us, plus the notes and things that we're making. So when we come together, we'll have questions to ask, and hopefully, they're going to find a lot of this stuff and give us the answers. Plus, the other thing that's going to be good with this thing is that, if you remember during the presentation, once we get the recodification done, the people that are going to have internal access, someone like Sarah, for example, or Walt at the planning board, you can go in there, and any other city or town in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that uses general code, you can access their bylaws and things like that. So you can go in and click and find out who's, type a couple of keywords, it'll take you to who's got this bylaw or a similar bylaw. You can cut and paste and, make your own instead of the way we do it now. So I just think this is just going to be a great database for us to be able to move forward in a logical manner and to be able to keep up with this thing annually, so that any changes that get made, general code will make them and update the code books and get it out to everybody. So hopefully where we are now will be a thing of the past. Okay, so let's start in then on, let's see, I think we started with section 4 was the first one that we had up there. So what did anybody have on section 4, if anything?
Well, one thing, in fact, that Sarah and I were talking about the other day, and that's the frontage requirements for residential A districts. The frontage requirements for B districts is 200, and right now the A districts are 150, which to me seems a little excessive for A districts. And I'm not just talking about a certain piece of property, I'm just talking in general.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems constraining in that.
You want a little bit of density in the A district. You don't want to have the sprawl. I think that's what Marshall's saying. Maybe a smaller frontage would be better in A.
That's, I mean, it's like, I understand you're trying to keep the rural and you need 200 feet, but the residential A districts, you're trying to lighten up a little bit on the development requirements, but it's almost as severe frontage wise as the B districts. So, I mean, to me,
that is a lot.
Also, over an acre. What do you really need if you don't have water and sewer? Was it Marshall? Was it you saying that there was a town where they were all based on whether you had water, sewer, or what combination of the two? Was it?
I have to rethink that, but yeah, that I did see that.
Like,
right.
how big a lot do you need to support both water and septic? How big a lot do you need to support only septic because you have town water?
Well, but I mean, you could have a huge lot with only 100 feet of frontage.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
So, I mean, to me,
area as well.
You just got to get in the door with the frontage, and then anyway, that was my only observation with respect to
Where are you reading that one? Where is that?
It's in table 1.
And I can't find table 1 in
It's
the,
on page 116 of the zoning.
well, I went to 116 in the version I have, and there's no table in it.
All right, well,
126. Try
126. You see, therein lies the problem. Why is the table 100 pages after its reference?
That was one of the things you called out, Sarah, in your letter there.
Yeah.
So anyway, other than putting the table where it belongs, that's my only other. Dave can speak to the height issues. I noticed that all the residential properties are 2.5 stories, whatever that means. And so I guess if it's 35 feet, and we had this discussion already, technically, I guess you could get 3 stories, but the allowable limit is 2.5. So I can't speak to any of that, but I'm just saying that the 100 foot or the 150 feet seems a little onerous.
I have no issue with the height requirement. People aren't going to build gargantuan towers. I'm not too worried about that. I think Marshall has a good point about making part of the you know, the more affordable part of the town be a little easier to develop potentially. And you have less infrastructure per taxpayer.
Now, is that downtown? Is that the village center type?
No, that's
South
more-
Ash,
South Ash? Okay.
And around the village center, it surrounds the village center districts.
Yeah, and those are areas that I know at economic development and other places, they've talked about higher density housing and things like that. Part of it has to do with water and sewer, getting more customers on those lines, that kind of stuff. And having a smaller footprint, smaller houses, so that makes perfect sense. Okay, good call out. Anybody have anything else?
No.
On special conditions or?
I have a ton of stuff. So,
Yeah.
but I don't want to take over. If you guys
No,
have anything to say first.
Go for it.
Sarah, that's why we're here. And
Okay.
again, our goal is to try to get through certain things. If we don't, we don't. And this is all important stuff. You've taken a lot of time and effort to do it, so have at it.
All right. So, I mean, the first thing in my email was that the table is just formatted poorly. That's something we can clean up. So I'm not going to spend time on that. And if we want to address lot sizes or frontage, I'm all open to discuss that. I don't know if that's what we want to be having a conversation about right now. I wanted to focus on clarity and things that just seem burdensome, the way they're written. So under special conditions 4.32 frontage, add a diagram. That was something that Rick Travers wanted to be able to help explain. It's a straight line connecting the two corners to explain how the frontage is actually measured. It's a little bit weird. And then I would like a diagram added for visual corner clearance, which I actually drew into my book. Find it. See if I can do this. It's not really focusing, is it? I don't
Yeah,
think
no, but yeah, I can.
it's
see
not
what you're talking
focusing
about.
on my little drawing. That was my corner clearance diagram, which looks a lot better than the blurry version that I can see on my screen.
Okay, that makes perfect sense.
And fences and walls. I really do not care for that section. A fence or wall can't be more than 4 feet tall, except it can be 6 feet at the rear yard line. I mean, if you have a German Shepherd, it's going to get over a 4-foot fence. I think the sides should absolutely be allowed to have a 6-foot fence. I don't understand why there's a limitation on fence height in general. I can see limiting it in front of the front facade of the house or something like that, or within the front setback, having lower fences. But once you're beyond the front setback, or in a more extreme version, the front of the house, why can't you have a 6-foot fence or even an 8-foot fence if you want to? Building code allows you to have a fence up to 6.5 feet tall without a permit. And with a permit, I'll happily give someone a fence for an 8-foot tall fence if they give someone a permit for an 8-foot tall fence if they have a neighbor who doesn't take care of their house and they don't want to see it. Or if you have a pool and you like to go skinny dipping, who knows? This is a burdensome limitation that I don't understand.
Well, and I also don't understand if it's greater than 6 feet, then the clearance between the fence and something has to be.
Yeah, the
2/3.
property line, yeah.
Yeah, that's
2/3.
also bizarre. If you have if you put up a fence on your property line, just your side of the line, your neighbors can put up a fence and connect to your fence. And if you put your fence up a couple feet back from the property line, then they want to fence their yard. They can't connect to your fence. They have to put up their own fence. And then you have these alleyways that are unmowed and unmaintained and awful. So I always recommend people put their fence on the right up to the property line, because you don't end up with these weird areas that don't get maintained.
I think
And
one of the
also-
reasons,
also have the-
I think one of the reasons that the zoning law was that the fence had to be off the property line was for maintenance. Because if you had to, you got to put the more decorative side of the fence toward your neighbor's property. And if it needed to be painted or repaired, and you could only paint it from the other side of the fence, you'd have to go on the neighbor's property to do it. So I think that was the intent. I didn't write that law. It was written in here long before I even was probably born.
It probably,
Because people have asked us about fences before and had to come to us for that. And that was what we read into it, was that why would they do this? Why would they insist you have to have your fence off the property line? And we finally figured out it must be for painting it and maintenance.
what,
Yeah.
You
what
wouldn't be able to get out.
in Fitchburg, they used to say, if it's a maintenance-free fence, you can put it on the line. If it's something you need to paint, they recommend that you pull it back a bit from the line. And my feel is have good relations with your neighbors. Just get permission to maintain your fence if it needs to be maintained, but it makes a lot more sense, given certain layouts, to put it on the line. If you have a cookie cutter backyard and it backs up to another cookie cutter backyard, they're probably going to want a fence too. They're probably want to just connect. If you live out in the middle of nowhere, you're probably not going on your property line anyway. You're probably just trying to contain some smaller area.
We
So,
probably also need to add some kind of exception or explanation about how you're handled on the corner of a lot. For example, I'm on a corner lot and we have been looking at putting a fence on the rear of ours, but that's the side of our neighbors. So that, that causes a little controversy there. So,
sure. So if you couldn't put a fence more than 4 feet tall in your front setback, which I could see that being a rule, not totally awful, but you have 2 front setbacks on a corner lot. So you wouldn't be able to get taller till you got beyond the 20 feet or the 40 feet or whatever it is for the district that you're in.
and then when you're putting a fence on top of a stone wall, that creates a whole
What do you mean
nother
the
issue.
total height?
Yeah. So, but I mean, if the property line is on the top of the wall, and you put your fence equivalent to that on your property, it's actually, or on the property on the downside of the wall, it's actually taller than 6 feet. It's 9 feet.
And this is why I just think we shouldn't really be dictating the heights of fences. We do have the visual corner clearance section at 4.34, which I have no problem with. And that would limit fence height as well, where there's a corner and where you need to be able to see for safety.
Mhm. No, but I
while
think
we're
our only
talking-
note on this one is that that it's something to be looked at and clarified. Yeah. And make a note of that for our future work on it. Yeah.
I think it should mostly go away.
Yeah.
And then the swimming pool fence should just go away because building code takes care of it. And this is inconsistent with building code.
Good. That's a
I'm
good.
shocked, absolutely shocked that we'd have anything that would be inconsistent.
You could have swimming pool fence, refer to 780 CMR state building code, but do we need that even?
Yeah, but even if you did that with the new system, you could click right on it and take you to 780 CMR. So,
Yeah, I just don't know that do we need to even say it? If we want to say it, then we could just have it be that short, just refer to 780 CMR.
Right. Okay. Anything else on 4 from anybody?
While we're talking about fences and walls, one of the the things that I've seen on several times in town is that with the height limitation, again, I think that this is, it's just that the boards, different boards haven't communicated together in the past. Because there are retaining walls that have, there's several of them in town already that have been put up. Because it's part of the septic system plan as to hold the breakout back because the lot line's too close. And they're in violation of section 4.37, some of the walls, because they're higher than they're supposed to be and closer to the line, but it's what the septic plan had called for, so the installer has no choice but to do that. I think there's one right on 101 right now. There's a big stockade fence on top of the retaining wall that was put in to hold the septic system back. But
Yeah,
again,
I know the one you're talking about. Yep.
it's not
Yep.
the Board of Health job to review zoning laws to see if we approve this plan, is it going to be in violation of the height requirements for walls? And I can understand that. That's not their job. But I think that it's at some point, since we're reviewing all of these bylaws, it would be a good idea to try to incorporate all of the laws with all of the different boards. So like you had brought up earlier, Marshall, somebody gets a permit to put a septic system in, and then
Yeah.
they go to you and you guys say, oh, no, you're within 200 feet of a river back there.
Yeah.
You can't do this. I
Right.
think that we all gotta either educate ourselves or somehow the other boards have to be able to look at everything and say, I wonder if there's any comments here from other boards before somebody gets too far along. Like you say, they spend a lot of money engineering a plan and then they can't do it for some other reason that they weren't aware of.
Okay, then let's move on to section 5, accessory buildings. And before we let Sarah jump in, does anybody else have anything prior to her comments?
Well, I have other comments, but not on accessory buildings.
Okay, then why don't you go ahead, Sarah?
Okay, accessory buildings, our definitions aren't well written. If you go back to the earlier part of my email, I suggest changes to the definitions in our definition section, which is in 2 or 1.5, I'm sorry. So there's a combination of things that I would change as with regard to accessory buildings. I have too many pages here to keep track of. So let me. All right. Currently, we have our current definition of accessory building is a building devoted exclusively to a use subordinate to and customarily incidental to the principal use. I suggest changing it to accessory building or structure, a building or structure devoted exclusively to a use subordinate to and customarily incidental to the principal use or building. A building is accessory only where a principal building exists on the same lot. It's just adding a little bit more to make it clear that you can't have an accessory building without the primary building. I also suggested an updated definition for accessory use. Instead of accessory use, a use subordinate to customarily incidental to the principal use, I would change it to say a use subordinate to, customarily incidental to, and located on the same lot with the principal use. To make that crystal clear that that's how this has always been interpreted in town, even though it wasn't written very clearly. And that would head off a lot of future issues.
Okay.
Have brought things up. Also, in the accessory building section, dimensionally speaking, there's a requirement for the setback for a setback of an accessory building from the primary structure, the distance of the height of the accessory structure. So if you have a 13-foot tall shed, it needs to be 13 feet back from your house. If you have a detached 2-car garage that might be 20 feet tall, it needs to be 20 feet back from your house. This is a regular problem. People come saying, I can't attach it for some reason or another, or if I attach it, then I can't meet the other setbacks for the primary structure. Why do I have to do this? And I say, I'm sorry, I didn't write this. This is a weird requirement, I will agree. But if you want to set back from the primary structure to an accessory structure, can we just say 5 feet or 10 feet? Make it something simple and something people can wrap their heads around, and it is less burdensome. If you want a detached garage at the end of your driveway that isn't really short.
I absolutely agree with you there.
So I would either get
So
rid of
now,
it. Or
so now, how do you solve the situations now? They go for a variance, right?
they have to get a variance, or they attach it if they can meet the setbacks otherwise. So I have one person who just had this bizarre design come in with this weird little attachment just to be able to put it as close to his house as he wants it. And it's,
Dave, how often do you see variances like that on this one?
well, I think people walk away. They don't
Yeah,
end
they
up
do.
doing the projects they want. But I've been here for what, 4 months?
Yeah.
And 5 months, something like that. And this has come up probably 4 times already.
Wow.
It's a real problem, and it really aggravates people. In fact, today I aggravated someone with it.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I'm not trying to aggravate them. They were thankful for me explaining, but they walked away frustrated that they couldn't do what they wanted to do without going for relief. There is also no size limit to accessory buildings aside from lot coverage. And we only require 10 feet from the side property line and 5 feet from the rear property line, which is nice and flexible, especially in smaller neighborhoods. But if someone puts in one of these like 30 by 40 foot metal storage buildings, which people love to put up, I wouldn't want to see that 5 feet from, you know, my property line. So in Sterling, for example, they had their accessory structure setbacks were freestanding uninhabited buildings up to 500 square feet, open decks up to 300 square feet, and pools were all in the same category. And they had 10 feet from the side, 10 feet from the rear, and the same setback as the front. So if we're happy with that sort of idea, we can do same setback as the front, 10 from the side, 5 from the rear to make it consistent with what we already have. But putting an upper limit on the building size, I kind of like. Maybe it doesn't have to be 500 square feet. Maybe it could be a little bigger. But how many people want to see a gargantuan building go up right near their property line?
Nobody that I know.
Yeah. So that's something that I think should be addressed. Pools really aren't addressed. That's also why I wanted to say accessory building or structure, because a pool is an accessory structure as far as I'm concerned. And so it should have the 10-foot and 5-foot side and rear setback, not the same setback as the primary structure. But we don't make that clear at all. And I feel uncomfortable telling people that's the setback that applies to their pools because we're silent on it.
You know, I never thought we'd have this much fun doing this.
So
Yeah.
decks, we don't address. So right now, decks attached to the house need to be meeting the full setbacks for the primary structure. I don't know if we want to keep it that way. I don't have a huge problem with keeping it that way or changing it. But in the example that I gave you from Sterling, open decks up to 300 square feet were allowed to be closer to the property lines. They were in the same category as the pools and the smaller accessory buildings. Okay, and then I went on to talk more about making sure we're clear about that you can't have an accessory structure without a primary structure, and then I put in an example from Sterling where they talk about a whole bunch more stuff about accessory structures, and we might want to consider if we want to include anything like that or not. This is from my email, where they talk about allowed uses are limited to uses customarily accessory and incidental to permitted principal uses, and uses that are permitted as principal uses within the zoning district and are clearly subordinate and incidental to the principal use on the lot. I mean, it's kind of legalese, but it does help explain things. But then it goes on to say accessory uses are permitted only in accordance with lawfully existing principal uses. Meaning, I guess if you have a non-conforming use, you say you've got a factory in a residential district, you can't be putting in accessory uses to that factory. You would need zoning relief for that. It says, however, uses accessory to non-residential principal uses shall only be permitted upon the issuance of a special permit by the planning board. An accessory use may not, in effect, convert a principal use to a use not permitted in the zoning district in which it is located. Where a principal use is permitted under a special permit, its accessory use is also subject to a special permit. I think that's a good cover your butt kind of thing so that you don't have that creep. Maybe it doesn't need to be written like this, but the intent behind it makes sense so people don't say, oh, well, you know, yeah, I'm not living in the house anymore, but I had a garage in the back where I could do my business, and now I'm just doing my business and I'm not living in the house. That sort of creep.
Yeah, I was just going to ask that example because I have seen people who they have a house and then they build a bigger garage, and then in that bigger garage they're running a auto repair shop, you know, that kind of stuff. and it's in a residential area, you know, and so yeah, I see what you mean.
Hey, Marshall, just a question for you. Are you going to include Sarah's email in our minutes?
Yes, I will.
Okay, yeah, because I was going to ask you too, if you, because it just makes sense to put that in the permanent record.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
This is great stuff, Sarah. I mean, it really is. I mean, you're really causing us to think about things that we don't think about unless a particular incident comes to us, unless we have to respond to it.
Okay, let's move on to 5.2 signs, which I know I did it later today, but I did email over the new sign bylaw as well as the marijuana bylaw. Yeah. I had asked Heather after our last meeting and she sent it to me pretty quickly and I never passed it along. So my apologies for that, but I don't know if anybody got a chance to print that out or not.
I guess, you know, my only comment was that I don't know when the original sign related bylaw was, but you know, we just approved another one in 2019. So those two have to be merged.
Well, no, 2019 replaces the one that's on the books now.
Was that a total replacement?
Yes.
Okay, then
yep.
That just needs to be done.
Yeah, we have to put that in there. And then you know, Sarah had some comments in there about that. So go ahead, Sarah.
Okay. I know that there was a certain aesthetic I think people were probably going for when they disallowed internally lit signs aside from open signs, but I find that a little bit problematic. So I just want to throw that out there. That's just an opinion. Say like CVS or something wanted to open a pharmacy downtown. They kind of have their signage that everyone recognizes and they know, and if you have to have external illumination on the side, it changes things. I wanted that that might be a little more business friendly. It might not be meeting the aesthetic goals of some people in town, but it is a little burdensome to not allow internally lit signs, especially when you have things that are very recognizable and you're kind of
Well-
depending on signage to get people's attention.
So, seeing I was one of the people that helped write this, I couldn't disagree with you more.
Figured.
So, I am personally, and the committee wasn't, the economic development's the one that did this. We were tired of seeing the Budweiser light signs, the Lotto signs, the this sign, and every other type of illuminated sign in a window down there. So,
I'm
You
not
can't-
talking about those. Like Athol Savings Bank has an internally lit sign. They're replacing it in kind, so they can do that. It was already an internally lit sign. But if there was a new sign, they can't do the sign that they had. It would have to be some other kind of sign with external illumination, which is a very different style. I'm not talking about the clutter signs.
Well, I think correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, but I sort of thought that, yeah, they established this bylaw, but it doesn't mean a CVS can't come in and ask for a variance to allow it to do something unique and then be granted a variance. But you were trying to just eliminate what was the you had to define it some way, and you were eliminating those sort of what you call garbage signs or whatever that were just sort of thrown up in the window and lighting the window. And that gave us the resources to be able to stop that. But if somebody came in with a bill, GFA wanted to ask for a variance, for example, say they were coming in new, there's nothing that would prevent them from doing that and us for considering it, and it with good justification, we may approve it. Is that correct, Bill?
yeah, no, there's a provision in there for the ZBA to actually issue a special permit for something like that. And that, in that, I think that summed it up, is that, what we looked at it was, how do you draw the line as to what's acceptable and what's not acceptable? So we grandfathered everything that was there pretty much, and then said, no, you can't do it. And then put a provision in that, again, if you had a special circumstances, it would go to another, authority to look at it and say, okay, let's consider what they're asking for here. Some of it for me, and again, it may not be right, it's just thinking back to when we did that a couple of years ago, we tried to have, hopefully there'd be some common sense approaches taken to these things. So if it went to ZBA and, like you said, Athol Savings was doing some particular type of sign that seemed to be reasonable and make sense, then sure, we can let you do that. But you just can't do it as a matter of right.
Well, at least there is a mechanism for a special permit. It's not a variance, so that's good.
Yeah.
If that's what it says, I don't actually know if
Yeah,
that's.
26.7 is and again, I think I remember, I know it's come up here about trying to stay away from the variances as much as possible, and do it in the form of a permit. And certainly there are flaws in this sign bylaw. I mean, I'd be the first to tell you that. We've met with Rick Travers on a number of occasions. And actually, I got to tell you, just a personal thing, the note that you put in there that he said that he felt that the town banners were illegal. Then why wouldn't he have mentioned that when we went through hours and hours and hours of discussion about all these things, never said a word. And I'm not quite sure why they would be considered illegal, but
I didn't actually look into that, but I had a note that he said that,
Yeah.
so I just threw it into my email as one of those, well, look
yeah.
at it later.
And look, I'm sure I'll get in trouble for this, but Rick Travers never enforced a goddamn thing. So I find it pretty humorous that he's coming out and saying that the banners that the town put up would be considered illegal. So he never enforced a sign bylaw in his life. So anyway, I got that.
Well,
off my chest.
he did enforce one sign bylaw once, which was to take down campaign signs.
Oh, yeah, no, exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah, at a key
Which-
time
which-
in the campaign.
Which was illegal, by the way. So, yeah, that's right. He did enforce it once.
Back to my little list. Yeah, I knew that first comment was perhaps gonna, it was more like Athol Savings Bank. It's a perfectly good internally lit sign. Why would they not be able to do that new? I just wanted to bring that up and have this conversation about that sort of thing, not the garbage signs that clutter up the windows.
Yeah, no, that's a fair call out. I don't have any problem with it. And you know what? We should look at it. Absolutely, we should look at it.
And the next one, allow sandwich board signs to be more than 15 feet from the premises, because the sandwich board sign for the Ashburnham Marketplace, I think that's what it's called. Those are the ones who need the sandwich board signs, the ones that are really far back from the road, which no one can see. So that 15-foot thing is a problem to me. If it's directly in front of your business, then that should be okay, I think. Or feel free to massage that however you want, but does that make sense to you?
Yeah, no, and again, I disagree, but,
You
you know,
disagree that,
for example, again, just me, I don't want the Ashburnham Market sign to be, a quarter mile away from their business.
it's not quarter mile, but it's at the road where people can see
Yeah,
it.
yeah, I know, and I don't think that's right. I mean, there's other things that they could do to get people to go to their business. And, for years, sandwich board signs weren't even legal in Ashburnham. When my wife had a business, I put a sandwich board sign out, and within 20 minutes, I got a cease and desist order. Now, I know that was because it was me. I understand how that works, but,
Town Hall has a sandwich board sign that they put out about voting.
Yep.
And that's more than 15 feet from the premises.
well,
And watering.
And just so we're clear, the biggest violator of the sandwich board sign was in fact the town of Ashburnham. They had those damn things everywhere. So, again, we could talk about it, but the intent was, to have, you got a business, if you've got some foot traffic, particularly with restaurants and things like that, you put your daily specials out there, right in front of your business, so you can see what's going on, trying to attract customers into the business versus, what the marketplace is doing. But that may be a particular situation that I have to deal with.
There's a new deli catering business that's moving into subletting space from Ashburnham Market. And he would like a sandwich board sign. And I'm like, yeah, I think that makes sense. They've already got one there. Who's going to know about him? It's so buried, so far back.
So I understand what you're saying, but a sandwich board sign is not the only way someone can advertise their business. And particularly as it relates to catering and restaurants and things like that, I have a little bit of knowledge in that particular area. And I just look at that as a convenient excuse for people to try to do something they're not supposed to do. If we want to talk about it and we want to make a change to it, again, everything's fair game in my mind. So we should do that. But as it is right now, that bylaw needs to be enforced. And that sign that's out there shouldn't be there. And another one shouldn't be allowed to be put out there right now until it gets sorted out. So if you make that exception, Sarah, what do you do with everybody else that comes in after and wants to do the same thing?
This is why I think it makes sense to allow, if you're going to allow them within 15 feet of the premises, why can't we say on the frontage in front of the premises? Why wouldn't that be okay?
Well,
Instead of 15 feet.
So what if the Ashburnham Marketplace was subdivided into 6 different businesses and you had 6 different sandwich board signs out on the road? How would that be looking?
I know that gets cluttered. And in fact, the guy who wants to open the business within Ashburnham Market said that the market would be willing to let him take the place of their sandwich board sign, so it's not cluttered out there.
Well, their sandwich board sign's illegal. The way the law currently says, it shouldn't be there.
And I find that burdensome to the businesses that aren't very visible from the street.
It is burdensome, but that's what the law says right now.
But they can go ask for a special permit.
Yeah, there's a way around it,
and
exactly.
have it adjudicated so that they can make their case and I would assume in their case, they would have to give rationale as to why this is the only way they can do it. That they can figure out.
And Dave and his board may 100% agree that it's fine and that's allowable, and I'm perfectly fine with that.
And
I can
now
give you a
I'm
case in-
not on Dave's board.
I could give you a case in point about that. When Tweedos had come to us because they were having a change of use. They were going to open up a miniature golf course, and they were going to start selling ice cream out a window. At the same time, he was asking for special permits for that. He had asked for a variance for a sign out on Route 12 at the end of Dunn Road. And the zoning board didn't really see anything wrong with that because Tweedos is kind of off the beaten path. And for him to really make that a feasible business, we thought it was a good idea to put a sign out there, you know, ice cream. Certainly, I think that we put a condition in there that it was not to be lit, but that was one of the instances where we thought a sign away from the business itself was a good idea, just because Tweedos was so far off the beaten path.
In now that wasn't something recent, was it, Dave? That was prior to the new sign bylaw, wasn't it?
No, it was not. That was years ago.
Yeah, exactly. So, and Sarah, part of the thing too is that the village center, at least in my mind, and at the time, the people on economic development, it's a little bit of a different creature. And we're trying to create a particular aesthetic down there and kind of up the game a little bit with the way that it looks, to try to attract people to make those businesses thrive down there. And there are going to be inconveniences that are associated with that. And this like 15-foot thing, that's one of those inconveniences associated with it. So, and again, there's going to be some people that aren't going to make out so well and others that will make out better. But
Will Town Hall move their sandwich board signs so they're only 15 feet from Town Hall?
they should,
You're not
again,
gonna be able to see them. It's,
well, so then they should ask for a special permit to be able to do that.
Can we just agree that there's a disagreement?
Yeah,
And-
no,
And just, you know, this is obviously one topic that needs to be, you know, thoroughly vetted between ourselves and general code.
no, absolutely. Well, general code's not going to solve that, but it's one of those things. Again, I think everything's on the table, and
Okay.
if we agree as a committee when we get to that it needs to be changed, then I'll vote for it.
Okay.
I'm good with it. Go ahead, Sarah.
okay. Projecting signs, they're only allowed in the business and industrial district. They're not allowed in village center commercial. I thought that would be kind of where you would have projecting signs. So,
And I think we screwed that up.
okay,
Because one of the things, and when I saw your note there and I'm back and looked at it, again, the thought process is that like on the, what I call the Zena block, I don't know what they call it now. The idea would be to have signs that did project out from the business so that as you're driving down the road, you can see them, again, of a certain size and things like that. So we may have erred there as far as how far the distance and things like that. So that,
I don't have a problem with the projecting sign section itself, but then I did ask questions about why are like 23.11 and 25.3E not consolidated. And the same thing for another couple of them. It talks about projecting signs in one place and then it talks about them again in another place. And I think that was also the case for maybe it was sandwich board signs. I didn't put a lot of detail in my email for that one.
yeah. And you know what, to Marshall's point, we're clearly not going to solve it tonight. So I think it's a good call out. We'll make note of it. And when we circle back around, we'll take a look at it.
That was the end of my signs.
Okay. Anybody else have anything on signs? And I just, when that thing came over and I was looking at it, it appears that we're either missing a page in that sign bylaw or the pages are misnumbered. It goes from 21 to 23. So I gotta check to see if when Heather scanned it,
I have a 22.
yeah, it didn't come over in the email that Heather sent to us. So I'm sure a page stuck together or something. Okay, where are we now? Signs, we did
This, I
that.
put this off of the website. You can just download it directly from the website.
Yeah, no, I know, but well, website's another topic. But again, after the last meeting, I had gone in and spoken to Heather, and I just said, look, send me the latest thing. And I'm sure it was just a page stuck in the scanner when it. Okay, next up, oh, we're at 7:10 already. Wow.
I was just gonna recommend that,
Yeah.
we defer for a couple, and not just because of the time, but also because since Sarah's email came in today, I'd like to take more, and the signage bylaw was passed on, and because I couldn't find the new one, I'd like to take more time to kind of go through Sarah's notes and the current signage bylaw.
No, I think that's good. We're past the appointed hour, and but Sarah, I can't thank you enough, because this is exactly the kind of stuff that we need to do. So
And the kind of debates we need to be having.
yeah, no, it's absolutely correct. So we had talked about going through
5.6, I believe.
5.6. So we're going to be at 5.3.
5.3 is where we're leaving off, so we'll pick up
Right.
at 5.3.
Right.
I have things to talk about in 5.3.
I knew we got things to talk about in every one of them.
Not everyone, but some of them I haven't really dug into yet. So like open space development thing, I haven't really touched that yet.
All right, so 5 point, so how for the next meeting, how far do you want to go? Do you want to do like 5.3, 5.4, 5.5? I mean, how many pages is that?
How many are there in section 5?
Section 5, it goes up to 5.21, but there's only 6 sections in the
I
whole
think
thing, in the whole
5 will
zoning
be good.
bylaw. So
I think.
No, but there's in section 5, there's 5.5 to 5 point what?
well, to 5.21.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Well-
it goes to 5.21. So let's
Pick a
just,
number.
yeah, let's do, we'll put on the thing for 5.3, 5.4, and 5.5. And see where that gets us. Again, we got time, we don't have to try to jam it all in. So
Okay.
let's do that. And then I don't have my thing in front of me, but I don't think we're meeting next week, are we?
Oh, yeah, I don't have your summer schedule either.
Yeah, I gotta look that up, but
I'm not gonna be able to make it next week, Bill. I'm gonna be out of town next Thursday.
yeah, I don't know that we're meeting next week, Dave. That's what I gotta look at. So I'll get back to us because we agreed on a summer schedule. I just don't
Yeah,
have it in front of me.
We are meeting next week.
We are, okay.
What happened is we were supposed to meet last week and we
That's
moved
right.
it to the 10th, so the 10th and the 17th, so do you
Well, do you wanna move?
move it to the 24th, next week to the 24th?
We can do that too. It doesn't make any difference to me.
I think that could work, and it just gives us 2 weeks.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that works.
pushes it out.
Okay, then I'll post for the June 24th, and we'll do the 3 sections, 5.3, 4.4, 5.4, and 5.5. And who wants to give me a motion to adjourn?
I'll do it.
All right, Dave Perry, motion to adjourn, second by
Glenn Hathaway, I
Glenn
second.
Hathaway, perfect. I'll call the roll. Marshall,
Yes.
Bill, yes, Glenn,
Yes.
Walt,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
perfect. All right, folks. Sarah, thank you again.
You're
Don't be a stranger.
Thanks.
All right, everybody have a good night.
You
Bye-bye.
too.
Good
Thanks
night.
very much.
See you. Bye.
Oh, Walt,